Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode number 6 of my podcast. Today with me is Benjamin Gosse, co-founder and CEO of Sensor AI. Welcome, Benjamin. Just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Matthias. Yeah, it's a joy to be part of your podcast. So Sensor is a German-based startup. It's a very young one. We've just been founded in May. And what we do is we use deep learning to help manufacturers find and prevent defects. So the goal is essentially to marry two industries together, quality control and predictive maintenance, because what we essentially want to achieve is to predict when an error is going to happen, help the manufacturer do something so that the defect doesn't happen, and so that he can save rework time, reduce waste, reduce costs. And it's been a fun journey so far, and I'm happy to talk to you about my experiences along the way.
Okay, one question about the company. I saw what is actually interesting. I saw on the webpage that you do hardware as well as software. Is that correct? What is the benefit of that?
We do. We are, at least compared to the industry, very vertically integrated. We offer both the software, the hardware necessary, so camera, computing unit, etc., but also the services like remote support, integration, installation services. We coach the employees to know how to operate the system. And we do this because in Germany, most of the medium-sized manufacturing companies actually don't have any system today in place in a lot of cases. So they're very happy to get everything they need out of one hand. And if we did not do that, then we just slow down our own processes so much. And it also doesn't make sense from the benefit side of things, because if everything comes from us, we can just be sure that it works.
So basically, you work as an integrator as well. So you do the software, but you also integrate with different hardware pieces to give a full solution.
Yes. We essentially help the customer integrate our system into his processes.
Okay, super interesting. And the major thing I actually wanted to talk with you about, because we know each other already from a while ago. And you were doing at the time something a bit different. And as I know, you call yourself on your LinkedIn page aspiring entrepreneur or aspiring founder. So you went through some iterations of startups, and I just wanted to talk a bit with you about this, like how you come up with the ideas, how you test the ideas, and how you figured out in the past cases that they were maybe bad ideas.
Yeah. So maybe to give this a bit of context, I essentially left my previous job at a startup at the start of 2019. And back then, I already had worked on an idea for a few months together with one other person on the tech side. And we came up with the idea of doing something on the DevOps side. So the people that just try to make sure that your code and your software works. And we did this in a way that is actually not very conform with what a book would tell you, which is to come up with an idea and then see if someone wants to buy the relating product instead of seeing a problem and then building a solution for it. I would argue that that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to fail, but what did make it a bit difficult for us, for sure, was that we, based on that idea, had to actually start searching for the people that had the problem that we were trying to solve. So it wasn't really apparent, okay, now we have this idea, who do we actually sell it to? So we had to run around and talk to a lot of people from the industry and find out, okay, who will actually have the budget, who will have the pain to do that, to give us money to buy it from us. And we got to a point where one of Germany's biggest startups at Celonis, one of the senior managers, was very interested in the solution, in the MVP. But the whole idea failed for a different reason, because it didn't work out with my co-founder. So definitely my biggest and first learning from this venture was that the team is really at the center of it. And that didn't prevent me from going further. At that time, we were already searching for a third person to join us. So when we decided to split up, I left him with the idea because it was a very technical one, and it essentially also came from him to a certain or to a large degree. So I essentially just asked the other person that we were currently assessing for a co-founder position what he wanted to do: jump ship and just leave us, go along with my then now former co-founder, or work together with me on something new. And he essentially decided to at least give it a try to do something with me. But then we were at the same place we were just 8 months ago in a different team. What do we work on? So we again came up with ideas. Interestingly enough, we landed on an idea that is now being done by a French startup, and they, I think, at this point are funded very well. We tried to build a platform where freelancers could present their profiles in a very detailed and attractive way. Because back at our startup, we often had the challenge that, okay, we need a sales coach. Okay, yes, there are a lot of sales coaches, but what if you want a sales coach for a B2B tech company in the e-commerce field that sells products in an X price range? So a very, very specific need, and you can't really search for a coach based on these criteria. So that it just wasn't possible. You had to have luck to find someone like that. So we wanted to enable finding people for very precise needs, essentially. Again, this failed because my potential co-founder actually, I'm not sure how deeply I want to open up about this for him, because it was a personal reason, and he just realized that he wasn't capable of doing this besides his then also full-time job. So he essentially quit after a few months. So again, I was back at square one, roughly 9 months after I started out. And I still didn't give up. I was at this part an alumni at the Xpreneurs incubator here in Munich. So I was able to sit in their offices and really work on something new. And I did a deep dive into essentially everything around green topics. So I digged through everything you could do on agriculture, waste management, water management, energy management. I first want to do something that is now being done, or was being done already at that point, but I didn't know, by a German startup. I think they're called Ania, something like that. They try to essentially build the AWS for the energy industry.
Okay.
Essentially decentralized energy storage units that are connected to the local grid and can be used to store and provide energy on demand. Which is something that will be heavily needed when the energy generation switches to green energy, because this is you can't have a solar plant running for 24 hours on the same level, right? You need to generate energy through the day, store it through the night, and you need resources and storage capacity for that. But just as it makes sense to do this in your home or to let companies do that, you ideally need a provider that does that for you. And we wanted to build the software for that. But then I needed people for that. And when I finally found a few guys, they rather wanted to do something different. And that was the last venture before this one. What we then actually settled on is something that I think is very interesting and will become a big part of that specific industry in the future, which is we wanted to provide specific financing for vertical farming startups or companies.
Okay.
Vertical farming, for any of the listeners that don't know this, is a concept in which you try to grow many leafy greens in a warehouse. You stack a lot of space essentially into a warehouse. You have artificial lighting, artificial supplements, and you have a very efficient way to grow greens. They grow a lot faster. It's a lot more space effective. It does need energy. That's the big downside, and it doesn't need a lot of tech. And it's also a very, very new industry. Yeah. So we believe that this was neither a VC case, because it's very unsure how well it can perform. So VC,
and expensive, I guess, also. Yeah.
Expensive as well.
Yeah.
And it also wasn't for banks, because you couldn't really calculate at this point, because the industry was so new that there was no good basis for this is what a working factory size X looks like, and that's the return it can provide, because everything was just so new. Yeah. So we were pretty sure that they would need some kind of financing at the very start to actually get it rolling above just the hobby project in your basement. Again, we realized, okay, the idea is too early, the market is too young. Our potential customers still struggle heavily with research topics and the basics of it. And one guy was telling me, I remember this clearly, guys, good idea, they will come to you, but today they have to care about their tomatoes rotting away in the warehouse because they just can't get the water right. Financing comes in 2 to 3 years. Yeah, so we realized, okay, either we stick to it and just try to work through this kind of time, but realized we neither have the money nor are we sure enough that it will definitely work well enough to stick with it. So again, we ditched the idea, and essentially this also killed the team. Yeah, and then Corona started, and now this.
So you had some time at your hand, and you basically were working on a new idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe to wrap this up, how this worked out now with Sensor is that my co-founder Nico already worked on the technology for quite a while, and we found each other in June 2020. Just when in Germany it was again possible to meet people based on COVID regulations. And he wrote in a Slack channel that he was searching for a co-founder, and that's how we met. And the idea essentially came from him. We since pivoted, but now the team mainly is a good complementary one, a stable one, and that's why it works.
I think this is actually super interesting topic is team, definitely, because this I actually often see that. I mean, it's also from an investment side, it's often they look very deeply on the team, not necessarily very deeply on the technology, because a good team can come up with a solution to something if needed. A bad team can ruin even the best of technologies. So I think so I guess it's a little bit the issue. So how you would suggest, because I mean you went through some good and some bad experiences with that, how you would suggest to figure out if there is a fit with a co-founder? I mean that's important. Like I mean there might be a good idea, but it might be on personal level it might not work out. So what is your experience? How you go about this? Like how you check for that?
So I would recommend two things. First, you will have to decide how you want to view your potential co-founder. So from my perspective, it was very clear that you can be friends, but first and foremost, it's a professional relationship. So anything that is tied to the professional relationship is more important than being friends, because this is not what a co-founder is about. Once that is clear, it, at least for me, also became apparent how you can evaluate each other, which is to just start working together. So for the example of my current venture, together with Nico, what we did was we met first, and in the first talk just like outlined our very, very high level interests, like what were we going for, what was the kind of startup we would like to build, and was there a general fit. And once that was clear, we essentially did a deep dive through like 2-3 more meetings into what all the technology, the current status, etc. was about. And once we realized, okay, there's like a good fit on everything that's there at this point, we switched modes from, okay, just share information about each other to, okay, let's start working on something to see how that works. And essentially had like a weekly meeting, everybody had tasks, we met, everybody gave a report, so to speak, about what he did, how he did it, what the result is. And we intensified bit by bit, because every new meeting was another data point to see, okay, how does this guy work? How is he reporting to me? How does he just speak about his work? How does he try to relay information? Does this convey the feeling that I need to have about this person? And if you then intensify, of course, you get more and more and more data points, and at least to me, became apparent very quickly that there's like a high level of fit on the work relation side, which for me, of course, was at the center of the whole thing. So I think in barely 6 to 8 weeks, I was pretty damn sure that it was going to work out, and I wasn't wrong. I should have done this previously as well, but I guess I didn't do it well enough, or was too hesitant to cut my potential teammates loose when I started to have a bad feeling.
That's actually a very good point, because I think also what you said before, that founders don't necessarily have to be friends. I mean, it can be, but it should not be like a rule or something like this, that you have to be good friends to be good founders. And additionally, I think sometimes it's even good, at least out of my experience, if it's people you maybe would not usually be around, because usually you choose people that you're like have some kind of feel like mental resonance, right? Like where you do the same stuff, you like the same things, you have the same interests. But as a co-founder, out of my experience, it's maybe not the best thing, because you know, like that leads you into like everybody walks the same way. Whereas if you're like different people, maybe somebody says like, hey, yeah, I know you want to go there, but you know, maybe we check something else out first, which is maybe in some situations better, at least out of my experience. How do you see that?
I would totally agree. So in our example, in our current setup, Nico is someone who is very, very precise, very, very careful about understanding everything very, very correctly, because on the tech side, on the coding side, you need to be extremely precise. It's a 0 and 1 kind of business. And this is also exactly what I was looking for. But as you said, it's on my end, my tasks are much more around talking to people, always being outgoing, looking for opportunities to connect to someone, which demands a completely different kind of skill set. And I agree with you that usually you surround yourself with people that are similar in these regards. So I would actually argue that in my network that I had previously, there's probably not a single good CTO to be found. Besides the CTOs that I know, of course, but I guess that doesn't count. So yeah, totally agree. You should definitely look out for a complementary skill set, not just 3 economics guys kicking it off.
Yeah, I mean, it can work, but it definitely is easier if you have like different skill sets, right, at your disposal.
Yeah. I would argue that it's very important to have all the necessary skill sets that you need to execute your business in the core founding team, essentially.
Yeah.
I think it's a big disadvantage to have like 3 people that do one thing, and then you have to, from day one, purchase the skill sets that you need to actually function. That just is always a constraint. And also from an investment side, I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I would fully agree. This is for me in our venture, it's very, very similar setup. Yeah, that's actually also a good point. Talking about the team brings us then also to generating ideas. So I guess like, especially in your case, team and ideas is like strongly connected, which is not in every startup always like this. For example, we started with the commercialization, which means there was kind of tech, something was already existing, and we built the business around, which I have discussed also with others, which is a little bit different. But in your case, the idea or the what you want to do with a startup comes out of the discussion with the team members. So how you go about that, like just like crazy brainstorming and coming up with crazy ideas and then searching the ones out which are not too crazy and could work, or how you do that?
So I think what we mainly did in almost all ventures was to try to settle on something that we felt was worth pursuing from our personal interest as well, and because we believed that there would be value in that. But then try to validate this quickly with external potential customers. We did that in every setup. First idea, we talked to a lot of DevOps people. Second idea, we talked to a lot of HR people. or team leads that usually are responsible for finding freelancers for the third idea. We contacted a lot of the leading people in the vertical farming sector worldwide. Were very interesting talks there to validate our businesses or ideas. And for our current business, we talked to a lot of manufacturers to validate whether our idea somewhat made sense. So I think you have to do this switch quickly, because I mean, as every book would tell you as well, your ideas start to fail as soon as they come into contact with reality. Yeah. So they only will get you so far. But it is worth discussing what you want to do and starting out with something that you are excited about, essentially.
But then the next question is like, I mean, I had already some discussions also in this direction, is basically market research versus market outreach. I guess I know the answer from how you answered the previous question, but what do you think about that? What is more important? How you go about that?
What we did do in at least the two cases of the vertical farming idea and the DevOps idea was to look for startup activities as an indicator of what are the cutting edge topics that are being pushed into the market, as of, okay, this is what the industry currently has, and nothing that goes further than that, because if a startup doesn't do it, at least it's highly likely that a corporate also doesn't do it yet, because otherwise, why would a startup do that? So through that, try to quickly get a feeling for where the market is and for where the market isn't yet. And then start having this hypothesis and then try to test this hypothesis against the market in a validation kind of process. So back away from research and just into the dirt of customer talks and interviews.
Yeah, so basically, as soon as possible, switching from market research to outreach, basically.
Yeah.
I think this is a very good point, because I'm here in Latvia. We have a lot of deep tech commercialization startups, and I think this is often the problem, because they are heavy on researchers, usually coming from universities. So of course they like to do research. So they often do a lot of like searching the internet, going through some market analysis and stuff like that. But they're then very short on actually reaching out. And I think this is actually, in my opinion, a major pitfall, because market research, can give you like a base level of understanding of the market, but then like you have to understand what's really happening in the market, right? Because market analysis can actually lead you into some dead ends in the worst case scenario.
Yeah. Can only agree here. I think that's why complementary teams are important, because a business function founder would probably not focus on research all too much.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, where team comes in. Yeah, definitely. So the next question is, of course, we went now through team to finding the idea. So the third one we wanted to talk about is like, I mean, you went already a little bit into it, but maybe we can do it a little bit more structured, is like, how did you find out that things are bad ideas? I mean, I think that's actually the hardest part, because there's always something you can argue with yourself, how you can rescue the idea. Like, but what is the point when you say like, okay, that's that. Let's move on. Let's stop this. That doesn't make any sense anymore.
So how did we find out that our ideas were maybe subpar? So maybe let's start with the vertical farming idea, because there it was the clearest response. Essentially, we were at the stage where we did validation with partners from the industry, whether it's customers or other companies in a similar field. And we essentially summarized the feedback that they gave us and tried to derive like the general sentiments of how receptive the market would be for our idea. And we just had some data points that were so clearly towards, hey guys, you are too early. And we couldn't find any data that was making us believe that this might not be the whole truth. Everything that we knew about the market was rather making the statement even stronger, because everything we read about the market was just giving this just more substance, that the market was just in a stage where our business model was not yet a need for the market players. And if you have such an overwhelming amount of data from actual market players, it becomes really, really tough to tell yourself, hey, this is still going to work. Because at some point you need to believe your customers that they will not buy it. So I think that was the somewhat easiest case. A bit more difficult was the DevOps case, because this is a gigantic industry. I mean, building software, managing software is something that is so huge that even with a very, very small niche, you can still have a profitable business. And it was SaaS-based, so that means there's like a little barrier for entry, but which means, hey, why not just try, right? Why give up just because of bad feedback? Then we also got good feedback. As I said, at some point we had a first customer that was interested. And what we did realize, though, was that the amount of functionality that we would need to deliver was on a very, very high level. We would have to have a very high level to be acceptable. So it wasn't like a B2C app where you can push out something that barely works and people will just use it. We wanted to be an integral part of building software for a company, which means that if they would have used our product, it would have had to be very, very stable, very, very mature for the little functionality even that we wanted to provide in the MVP. And that alone made it quite tough with essentially just 2 people to try to get there. So there were, at least from a resource side, was a high constraint for the entry, higher than we anticipated. But at this point where we realized, okay, there might be a market, but it might not be as easy as we thought it could be, we also split up. So I don't know in detail what happened afterwards. What I got from my former co-founder, potential co-founder, was that he did try to push this topic a bit further, but stopped because he realized it was too niche of a market. But I can't really go into detail because I just don't know how that actually played out, like what kind of feedback he got after I quit or left. But I think how we did it, how we got to this point was the right way. I think we did close to 100 custom interviews, etc. Try to already sell something even though we didn't have it yet. Stuff you have to do to really know, okay, is there feedback from the market? But it's an indecisive or undecisive result essentially for me because I quit halfway through, so to speak. And for Sensor, we pivoted at some point because when we started out, the idea was to actually use synthetic data to generate a data set, so you don't have to have like the actual physical product to train your camera, so to speak, which would have been cool for a number of reasons and a number of use cases. But we realized that there was not that amount or just the level of market need that we felt was necessary for us to proceed with that. And that also became apparent because we talked to customers. We, at this stage, gathered a lot of letters of intents, gathered market research together, and just tried to combine all the data points we had to essentially a gut feeling. Because in the end, you as a founder, you have to make a decision, and usually that comes from gut feeling, and gut feeling comes just out of all the data points that you interpret in your way. And we made the choice that something else would be more attractive for the market for us. And at this point, we are very happy with that choice. Of course, I don't know how it would have played out if we kept the former idea. I think there is value in there for the future, but it's a much tougher topic than we anticipated at the very start as well. So the naivety that you have as a founder definitely played a role twice already.
But that's actually what is interesting about this is as a founder, I think what I see out of our discussion is that you have to basically be ready to kill your idea, right? Like you have to be,
at any day.
Yeah. So this, I think the most important, I think also the most important learning for anybody who wants to start it, even if it hurts, sometimes is the better way, right? Because I guess you invested a lot of time in the things that you did also previously, and it's of course, I guess, also not so easy to let it go, right?
Yeah, I would actually argue that the best kind of stance towards your own idea is to be never satisfied with how good it is. I would always try to find a way, how can we make this vision even cooler? How can we make it more powerful? How can we make it more appealing to the market, to ourselves? And always try to piece new things together and think further down the road, and never stop thinking about, is what we're doing the right thing to do? I mean, just look at Mark Zuckerberg, essentially revamping his whole company after 20 years because he thinks he has to. That's a true founder kind of thing. A manager wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, it's very, very, very true, and also very good finishing words for the podcast. I think that's a great advice for everybody listening out there. So let's stay ready to kill your favorite child.
All right, Matthias, it was a joy to be part of your podcast, and wish you best of success in the future.
Yeah, you too, Benjamin. Was a real pleasure.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.